So welcome everybody to episode 3 of our Future Proofing Your Business series. We've loved what we've brought to you so far, but I'm particularly excited to have today with me one of our leading experts. At Executive Republic, we're drawing on our pool of experts with us, and today we'll be discussing financial health. Discussing how businesses and their leaders, we want to be helping them as much as with as much information as possible, trying to keep it simple, but just asking them asking Danny, who I'll introduce in a moment, where should we be starting, and what's going on now, what's he seeing with his businesses and all of his contacts. So I'll introduce Danny. Danny, thanks for joining us. Danny's the founder and principal of AMCO Chartered Tax and Financial Advisors. The list of acronyms behind Danny's name, we've got FIPA, FTIA, FTMA, Diploma of Financial Services, Executive MBA, a JP. His career in finance is 29 years long, in commerce and advisory practices, namely Deloitte Australia. So the huge thing is there to get all of those acronyms behind your name, Danny Mazevski. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I guess I could start by understanding, what does it take to keep so relevant and up to date with financial advisory these days? It's a full-time job in itself, right?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity, Laura, to have a bit of a reflective moment here for small businesses and to shed some light on a world that's got very uncertain at the moment. How do we keep up with all these all these CPD? You generally have to have a love for what you do when it comes to whether it's tax or finance in general. If you don't have it, it becomes a challenge. So it's always a sweet spot. If you enjoy it, you'll always find the time. But you're right, there is just that much information upon us, whether it's be from tax or the financial planning, that you literally are spending a lot of hours. And we also have a team of 14 staff now here at AMCO. So it's an interesting place where there's a lot of young people with desire to achieve pretty much what sort of I've achieved after 30 years. And it never ceases to amaze me how bright they are and how much they're testing the limits of my knowledge every day. So that's how I sort of stay relevant, because quite frankly, it'd be embarrassing if I come in and they ask questions and they know more than I do. So that's the fear every day that lurches in the back of my mind. I need to stay a few steps forward. And that's, I guess, how it all happens,
Well, you're always impressing me with your knowledge and how up to date you are. So you must be passionate about your learning. So yeah, it's a great thing.
And key of being called out by the millennials at the moment that know more than we do, right?
So compliance is not the issue; it's actually being caught out. Oh, that's good. Yeah. So it's interesting that we're meeting today. We actually scheduled this, but it's actually really timely. The day, the end of September has come. It's almost, D-Day for many businesses. If we take ourselves back 3 months or so, everyone was looking and waiting to see what happened. And we're here at the end of September, when everything was supposed to make a big change, and we would know what's going on. How are you finding it? What are you seeing out there with your clients?
Look, the uncertainty is still there with a lot of our clients. They say everything's okay, but they still have the anxiety behind them. I think there's a level of uneasiness there that we haven't seen how the economy is going to sort of perform when the stimulus gets pulled away. I think the government's done a reasonable job of smoothing the transition out and not having a cliff where things fall over. But I think most businesses are sort of holding back and sort of not recruiting, not putting any staff, not committing into anything until they see the full effects of it. And when would that be? Look, the federal budget is one indicator next month, so that will sort of shed some light on what the government's thinking. Mind you, the federal budget was pushed back from May. It's been in May every year for as many years as I remember when I was a young kid. Yeah. And here we are now, we've pushed it 6 months and we still probably don't have clarity. So it's important to see what the government feels. what our total debt ends up being, where it sits at the moment, whether it's going to likely to increase more before it comes down, what the unemployment rate will do. But I suppose we're going to see a little bit of clarity with that, and then I expect probably February, March, early next year, by about March, a lot of it would have unfolded, whether the economy is strong enough to actually hold up with all the stimulus being taken out. I don't have figures in front of me, but there was some interesting stats floated around what it means for the average consumer, just how much stimulus per person we've thrown. But it has been a rather significant number. Now, that one that comes out, you would hope that the economy can actually sort of hold its weight within that without having that stimulus. And we all know that you can't run forever, as Phil Lowe from the Reserve Bank said. There is no free lunch, he said. Really, at the end of the day, he said, we're expecting the economy to pick up the tabs because we can't underwrite it forever in the day.
Yeah. I'm seeing the same as you. People are uncertain and just not sure and feeling sort of a little bit frozen, if you like, and just not knowing where to turn next. Even if they are doing well, they're still very unsure about the future. And I mean, if you're saying that as well, the fact that they've actually changed the budget and pushed the budget so far out is a telling sign, right? So for I know you can't give any advice, but predictions. How have you got any predictions about the budget, just in very short, general terms? Anything that you see?
Well, we get sort of, I suppose, views from various fund managers and just the guys that stay close to the to Treasury, I guess, as well. A lot of the things they're going to centre around liquidity. Obviously, the government's relaxing, as we've all seen. They're trying to wind back a lot of the restraints that were put onto the banks in terms of the Royal Commission. So we've had some stupidity there where we, ASIC basically took Westpac right through the courts and lost the case against that big case that they were running. So the government finally realised that we do need liquidity relaxed, and the measures that were starting to be put in place are unworkable, really. So that's a good thing for the future, I guess, in the sense that the government sort of realising that they've perhaps gone too far at restraining lending. So the other thing is, obviously, most would be aware that we had the immediate tax write-off provisions extended till December. They were going to end in June, that instant write-off, the 150. So that was extended till December, and they've got, we're expecting a little bit more incentives there for small business to keep the stimulus going. The federal budget obviously is going to sort of has to also consider the context of the lending rates. I think the Reserve Bank's sort of almost at near zero now with their lending rates. I've just picked up the other day, New Zealand Reserve Bank, for example, is put on the agenda negative interest rates now. We may head down that path as well. I think the Reserve Bank has made it clear that they won't be entertaining it, but leading economists are saying, I don't think the Reserve Bank would have much choice if they can't lift in any way. It may be on the agenda, It's just hard to fathom negative interest rate where you're sort of borrowing money from the bank and the bank's giving you money to borrow money, or you leave your money there and you got to pay them money to leave the money. So most clients, whenever I share that concept, and just think the world's gone mad, but we may well find that will be on our agenda as it is in New Zealand with the Reserve Bank.
That does actually play with your mind a little bit, doesn't it? Is that unprecedented?
Yeah, that's pretty much not the world as we know it now. And I think if we sort of pick up those things, we say we're in a very unusual phase of economic cycles that we don't have precedents. I mean, we've got depressions, we've had recessions, but where you're actually going with such low rates. And then the question is, would that ever spark inflation is the next thing. So there's some fundamental things that are sort of playing in the minds of Reserve Bank and the government that you don't sort of see or hear most days. But it'd be interesting whether the budget actually addresses some of those, or there's a glimpse of where they're expecting that aspect of the economy.
Yeah, and just even listening to you, then it's no wonder that people are really uncertain about what the future holds, isn't it? Because that's huge. I had not heard that. So let's take us to the small business owners that are potentially watching, and our communities between us. You know, how can we help them come from the state of overwhelm and really simplify it? Like really just think, well, what are the actions I can take if I'm feeling a level of fear or uncertainty at the moment? How can I take the lead? What can I do to really get myself future-proofed, I guess, in terms of business?
Yeah, look, I mean, the first and foremost, I always say, is you've got to sort of, there's a lot of that other things that we can't control, obviously. I mean, we don't know where the rates are, we don't know where the government incentives, but that's irrelevant. In my thinking is you need to be aware of that to pick up some opportunities.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, I think the business has really got to sort of step back and say, look, I can't have much influence on that. I'll take that into account. But I honestly believe that you need to have very clear where you are now in terms of all your reports, your finances, your history, your data of operating your business. And if your business records aren't up to date, and there's quite a lot of small businesses that are struggling to get up to date, there might be a quarter behind, there might be 6 months behind. So first and foremost is get it up to date. Even if you can't get all of it 100%, 80% is better than nothing. Bring it up to date. At least you can see where you are with things. So first of all, know exactly where you are now. I think a lot of businesses don't know the value of their business. Everyone's sort of moving along in life, hoping that one day they'll sell out or someone will buy them out at X amount of dollars. Surprisingly, from our analysis, very few businesses realize anywhere near where the owner thinks the business is worth. So to me, I think it's important to actually have a look at that sooner rather than later, because you're building up an equity in a business and you have no idea where it is. You don't want a big surprise at the end that you have to work another 10, 15 years because you got your valuations wrong and you built a business that's not sellable. So I definitely think that needs to be done. And when it's done properly, you should be able to know where the gaps are in improving that business. And then you can sort of take some step and say, well, I know where to put value now in my business. The other thing I think we need to also, and I suppose I can reflect, quite recently we've had a number of new clients that have come in, and the key thing that comes up when we ask them, why did you leave the other advisor or accountant? It's, well, the usual thing is they're not proactive, So I dug a little bit deeper to find out what this proactive means. And when you really sort of dig into it, what most small businesses are looking for is like CFO, management accountant, or a finance manager role, or commercial mind, basically. They can actually do a lot of the future opportunities of the business and actually help the owner with the future part of the business. But then the problem is most of them engage tax accountants, and the tax accountant, you pay tax on your history of your profit, you don't pay tax on the future. So if they're two different accountants, they're both accountants, and there's an accountant for tax that does great things on tax, but there's a finance manager or a CFO management accountant that looks at things like, for example, profitability of the business. They look at opportunities that are in the business. How do you scale up the business? How do you raise money through the bank to fund this business? Look, those things are the future. And so it appears that most small businesses, from our inquiries, are actually looking at it the wrong way. They're expecting to find this perfect accountant that does tax and everything else, and they just can't get that. So you almost need a tax taken care of, but you then need a finance mind, and you can't afford to engage a full-time finance mind. So you probably need some consulting part to actually push along to help you on the journey to move the business forward. So that's been a very novel and sort of an interesting finding that we've had in recent times. The other thing I think is just being awareness of the current economic environment, which is what we spoke about before in terms of liquidity that's available there. The fact that you can tap into a lot of liquidity for small business with the banks at some attractive rates. But that comes back to having a good budget, having a good valuation of your business, something you can actually share with them to give them confidence that, your business is worth investing in, you see. I suppose the last thing I think it's a big one, it's a lot of business owners basically have lots of ideas, discussions, but no accountability. No one follows it up. They're going to do that and they put it down, or they give commitment to themselves, but we break it. You know, that's the problem. I think if we give commitment to ourselves, our mind is quick to override it for good reasons why it's not done. So my thing is work out what's important in the business and personal lives, and give that commitment to someone that, you know, you're not going to be able to break easily.
Yeah.
So look around.
You're singing to my heart talking about accountability. This is where I think in so many different areas of the business, and as you know, leaders of the business, accountability, it's all the way down. It's missing and you know, if we're not held accountable, and it doesn't need to be a big scary tactic, does it? To be accountable, it's enough to actually know, motivate somebody to achieve their goals and objectives, that if they're in charge of them, to just be asked, where is that document? How are you going with that? If you know you're going to be asked, that's accountability, isn't it? It doesn't have to be this massive reward or incentive, does there?
No, well, this is the thing. And like we said at the outset, at the start of the session, I'm accountable to have knowledge to these 14 staff behind me. So that's a massive accountability, because basically you're leading and you're inspiring these people. Now, to me, that's a big fear that I can't afford to drop the ball. Yeah. It's not only a question of the minimum that we got to do in terms of our licensing and stuff. It's really the daily testing that happens. So that's, I suppose, the vigor that goes behind it, you know, the whole structure. I think that's a big one. No matter what we do, I think that accountability, and unfortunately, small businesses are generally speaking, and I'm not tarnishing a brush across all small business, but they're very unstructured, you know. They jump from one thing to the other, not digesting or picking up the things that are important and then locking them up and say, listen, I'm going to have these 2 commitments done, and I'm going to give my commitment. I'll be done in 6 months to my whoever they want to pass that commitment to, and then don't know in 6 months.
Juggling the balls in the air, isn't it? So yeah, focus on the right activity is important, and just making it digestible, I think, is a winner. I want to take you back to the valuation, just to talk briefly. The accountability is really important, I think, but you know, people, I think many small businesses and family businesses might not have even really considered the thought of, you know, the end in mind might be that they want to sell their business or invite investors or whatever. But like you say, should you even be running your business if you aren't profitable or the value isn't there? And like you say, you need to know that, don't you? From a lending perspective, there's so many reasons why you should know the value of your business.
I mean, for one of the things I always look at with successful businesses is if the end objective is to actually one day cash out of the business, does it make sense to cash out now? For example, in terms of structuring another business and actually restructuring it where you can get your funds paid out, and then you basically have the debt locked into the business, which is fine if the business is viable. Yeah. It just gives you a chance to get a glimpse into the value of your business. Yeah. And quite rightly, as you say, there's a lot of businesses where they're not making enough money and they've really bought a job. They're on the treadmill. People have just generally bought a job in a business. You know?
Yeah, I'm sure plenty of people really are resonating with that comment. The old hamster wheel.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, when you look at that, you think, well, if they know what the value is and there's not much value and there's no chance of getting that value up, does it make sense to fold it and just go and, you know, get a salary instead? You might do yourself a favor. And this is where the problem is, getting back to what we said earlier, no disrespect to tax accountants. No. Yeah, and I've been both. I've been an accountant, I've been a tax accountant, commercial accountant, financial advisor. I've just stepped through the different roles. No disrespect to tax accountant. The tax accountant will continue doing your tax return and produce losses and say, this is good. We're going to use those losses in the future. Not to tell you that, hang on, you've just bought yourself a job here. You know, you're not running a business. You bought yourself a job. I demand that you think about closing it and moving on, mate. This is not working. But they will do the tax return and accumulate losses.
Yeah, because that's what you really mean, isn't it? Like someone's doing their job and they're not doing anything wrong by you. They're doing the right thing. You know, you don't have to pay tax this year. That's, you know, hands up in the air for a lot of people having that mentality. But if what you're talking about, isn't it, is someone who has the capacity to understand your whole picture as a human being and your family, your entities, and safeguarding your future. That's the important part, isn't it? You know, they might not, even the way you lease a vehicle or equipment would be maybe different if they know the whole picture.
Yep. Which is interesting, because quite often when we get asked the question, I tend to ask a lot of other questions, and they often say, gee, why would you ask that? So to them, it's really on the basis that they've asked the question and they want it answered. They can't see past that question, you see.
Yeah.
So it's good. And my question always is, well, why? Why are you doing this? You know, so not so much what the tax consequences are, but why are you doing it? So
that's like you're taking me back to my son being 2 years old. Or why?
Yeah,
why do you want to do that? Yeah, and you should be asking why. It's back, like you said, back to basics and keeping it simple, right? But someone caring is one thing, but having the expertise to advise you in the right way to set yourself up for your future, whatever it is, and having, you know, asking the hard questions is really important. What are the steps, or how do you actually find that person besides ringing AMCO tax accountants? You know, what should we be looking for to get somebody in that, you know, at that capacity? Yeah.
Well, what you need is, you do need an accountant that has actually been, I call it in commerce. And so all accountants that are listening to, or will listen to this little segment, will probably relate to what I'm going to say. Accountants, we normally go through, you get you graduate, you get out in the field, you either get into public practice, which is tax practices and the like, or you get into commerce, where you're a commercial accountant for a listed or unlisted company. And they're the sort of two areas. Now, the problem is, if you only stay in public practice, you really don't have a good exposure on commerce. So by actually being in commerce, then you get to see how accountants, for example, CFOs, financial controllers in a listed or unlisted companies, how do they work? You know, they're not worrying about tax. They would have very little involvement on tax, because tax will be done by an outside chartered accountants, let's say, but they are squarely working with the general manager or the directors to actually get all the improvements for the business and restructure businesses and look at the strategy and the business plan and all those aspects. So to me, I think you need to have an accountant that's actually been in that space.
Yep.
So, and unfortunately, not many clients actually ask. I mean, in my 20-something years, only one client actually interviewed me before we had the session to say, what have I achieved in life? They wanted to know, what have I achieved? They said, we're going to share all our life, so we want to know your life now, and what have you done with your life?
Yeah. What gives you the right to tell me what to do with my money?
Yeah.
And fair enough.
Yeah, but in 6, 7 years or whatever, one client out of a couple of thousand clients in all those years. It just shows how naive sometimes clients can be. They just have this perception that if they ask questions of the professional, they will offend. Yep. But reality at the end of the day is your file is important. You can ask any questions and hope that they answer it.
Yeah. And would you say that sometimes it's people just looking one-dimensionally at the task and just saying, you know, I just need that done and I don't want to do it because I am the one who's building houses, or I'm the one who's, you know, making this amazing product or selling this dress or whatever it is. I just need you to take that headache away from me, rather than think about it as an investment for your future.
No, that's precisely right. But to me, I think it's still relevant. Back to your question about the how do you find an accountant that can actually do both? You can't have someone being an expert on both in both camps. No. And we've certainly taken that opportunity at AMCO to actually separate progressively that aspect and say, yes, we're accountants, but within the practice, we have accountants that actually specialize just in the tax, and we free some of the other, what we call it, more commercially minded accountants to still do the tax, but concentrate more on the improvement commercial side of the work for clients. And it's just having enough, I suppose, resources to be able to break that problem down. Yeah. Otherwise, it means having to go to one practice that specializes in commercial support, and the other one just purely the tax. And they can't be doing both.
No. Yeah, that makes So much sense. So yeah, and then just finally the accountability, just making the point that it doesn't have to be you that's accountable. You just couldn't do your job if you were the one who held yourself accountable. And the person who's accountable doesn't necessarily have to be doing the actual work, does it? It
No.
means, yeah. So choosing someone who's in charge of, you know, delegating a set of responsibilities and making sure things get, you know, met along the way to make sure you finish in the right space. Is that right?
And they don't even have to be in the same discipline. I mean, for example, you might hold in high regard your trainer, for example, or you might be the priest, for example. You know, this often, you know, you go in there and disclose, and you might say, you know what, I'm going to make a promise that I'll deliver in 3 months' time when I come and see you next time. So anyone basically that you hold in high respect, and you go, you know what, I will feel uncomfortable to break a promise with X. So they don't have to be an accountant, they don't have to be a commerce financial person, but it has to be a person that you feel uncomfortable and uneasy to break a promise.
So that matters. Yeah. Mentors, anything. That's great. So we might just go through, like we're sort of coming to the end. We might just like run through those 5 quick steps to what you were speaking about before, and just to sort of summarize it, if I can get down to the bottom. There we go. So like you said, know your position and the value of your business. That's daily numbers, forecasting, you know, looking at your results all the time, and trying to make sure that that's a discipline that you have within the business, and knowing the value of your business, which comes down to having that, you know, that commercial or, you know, proactive accountant. Then all of those things come after that, isn't it? You'll know your gaps, you'll find them, you'll understand the opportunities of diversification potential, or, you know, missing gaps in audiences, or even within your business where there could be productivity opportunities. You know, you're doubling up on tasks, and that's a big thing for small businesses, right?
Yep, and ultimately might be not a business, might be just you've bought yourself a job and you need to exit. And
Exactly.
Unfortunately, tax accountants, again, no disrespect to tax accountants, would not probably disclose that clearly. You know?
Yeah. So the big one there is really review the advice you're receiving, and, you know, treat it like an interview. Treat that person like they're coming into your business as a team member and a staff member. You know, having awareness of your economic environment. So keeping up to date with what's going on and how that affects your business. You know, the lending discussion is really one of those examples, isn't it? So many businesses might not realize that they could access that. Yep. And finally, you know, the question is who. I should have a question mark after that, shouldn't I? That's really bad punctuation. But who is accountable for your results? Make someone accountable. So that they're the tips that you've given us. That's so good. I think really nice and simple for people. Thank you for also giving us your predictions. The next webinar we've got coming up from you, we're cycling a few different subjects and topics each week. The next one we've got coming up for you in a few weeks, which I think is in about 4 weeks' time. It'll be really timely because the federal budget will have taken place. You will be able to give us some really strong predictions and talk about the status and even more clear action points and what businesses can expect in the coming months, and, you know, some more action steps to take action for the future of their business and themselves. Thank you again, Danny, for your generosity and sharing your knowledge with us. It's very valuable, and we really look forward to you joining us in the next episode.
Not a problem. It's always a pleasure, Laura, and you stay well. Thank you.
You also. Thank you.